Another thing that you can do, which I think is very helpful, is a little exercise, is go back to your most recent transactions and ask yourself, what were the things that you did to help guide your clients? And what were the things that were most valuable to them throughout that deal? Welcome, everybody, to Life at 10 Tenths, where we inspire people to live at the pinnacle of their ability and purpose. As always, I'm Matt and he's Garrett, and we're excited to chat with you today, have an awesome episode laid out. And for those of you who are new to Life at 10 Tenths, head over to lifeat10tenths.com to learn more about everything that we have to offer, including our just launched 11 Circle, which is our new premium membership for all of you, where you're going to get a whole lot of awesome stuff, including, but not limited to, live Q&As with Garrett and myself, and also some incredible live guest trainings, all of which that will be recorded and stored in our community. And you can also learn about our free community that is housed in the same ecosystem there that you can join. And of course, we also have our Facebook group. All that can be discovered at lifeat10tenths.com. Garrett, good morning to you, sir.
Well done. Nice intro there, Matt. You got all
was
the
like the
points
first
covered.
The first long one, really.
I was like, I don't even need to do anything at all. I think we're good, man. This is great. So good morning and welcome everybody, and excited to be back with you again. And Matt and I've got a fun topic today. We're gonna we get to talk about commissions. Oh my goodness,
the commission quote crunch.
The commission crunch. Yes. This is, it's interesting as we've been getting closer and closer to the deadline coming up here about, changes and all the people getting their forms together and what's this going to look like. I've been kind of waiting. I've been waiting in the background going, somebody's going to speak up. Something is going to come to light here that is going to make us all stop and go, okay, wait, what does this mean? Like, how's this going to move forward here? And the Northwest MLS just spoke up.
Yes.
And made their statement at kind of where they stand and what this looks like. And this kind of coincided with a conversation I was having with a coaching client up in the Pacific Northwest. And they made the comment, Matt, that, we're starting to see commissions come down. They're tracking it in their marketplace. And he says, we're all talking about it as an office. Commissions are coming down. We're seeing lower commission rates. And it was really interesting because I asked the question, I said, do you think it's the consumers demanding lower commissions, or do you think it's the realtors' inability at expressing their value and being able to show their value and hold the commissions? And it brought a really interesting conversation up, because what we ended up agreeing to was it's actually the realtors that aren't able to justify their fees that they're charging, which I think I've been saying that ever since this whole thing started, because I started asking everybody, I started saying, tell me why I would pay, your fee that you're putting on the table. And I would getting the fluffiest of fluffy answers of like, okay, at the end of this, I don't know why I would hire you, by the way. I don't know why I would pay that fee. And the sad part, Matt, is these were really good real estate agents that I would totally have stand behind me. I know them because I've been around them forever. And I would not hire them based on what they said to me. That scares me. And I think that's what's causing a lot of what we're seeing out here.
It definitely is. And I will say that the whole lawsuit thing, we say it hasn't been about realtors getting paid too much. It's really been about transparency, which I somewhat agree with. But here's maybe an unpopular opinion. I think based on how realtors are handling this, perhaps maybe as an aggregate, they are getting paid too much. If you're unable to support your value, right, then maybe those rates don't make sense. And a lot of people are like, what? No, don't say that. And I'm like, I'm not saying that all realtors, because when you look at individual agents out there, clearly having a competent, well producing, meaning performing agent helping guide you through a transaction is absolutely beneficial for you. The problem is we look at this overall data and then paint the same, quality brush across all realtors, which is why you end up with these two sides of, you have, a certain consumer base that has a unpopular opinion of realtors. And then you have the whole realtor community that has this maybe lofty opinion of themselves, but if they can't articulate the value, Garrett, then, well, why should consumers pay a certain amount?
Well, the word that keeps coming to my mind is that I think a lot of realtors feel they deserve a certain fee. And I think it needs to come from the other way of the client saying, my professional deserves to be paid at this amount because of the value they brought. And it has to go from the consumer. And what I watch a lot of realtors turn to really fast is what I deserve. I deserve to be paid a certain amount. And it's like, if you can't articulate why, then I hate to say it, we have a problem with the person that's actually paying the fees. For instance, we just had our floors redone on our house. We've been, after 11 years, we're finally making progress on this beast. And it was funny when the floor contractor came and put the bid on our table. Sarah and I looked at each other and we're like, we could do this. We could do the floors. I think I could do this. I think I could do it. And we started talking about it and contemplating, okay, what would it take? The rental of the equipment. Have you ever done this before? Nope, never done floors. But it's floors. I mean, how hard could they be? We're just sand on the top of them. We're going to throw some stain down, all this stuff. And Sarah and I looked at each other and I said, this is the focal point of our house. Like when people walk in, the number one thing that people are going to have contact with in this house, guests, anybody who enters it, is the floors. They're not going to touch the walls and be like, oh, like what kind of texture did you use on these things? Like they're not going to be up on the roof looking at the shingles that we put on, but the floors, every single person who walks into our house is going to have to interact with our floors. And I said, it's worth it. It's worth the fee. I saw what other floors this gentleman has done, and I know he's gonna. I want those floors in my house. Like that's what we're going to do. And all of a sudden, this gentleman deserves to be paid for what he's put on the table here. He has earned it. It's a fee that I have agreed to and been like, it's worth it. I want to do it that way. And it's different than him coming in and saying, but you don't understand. Like I demand or I deserve a certain fee to be able to do this. It's the wrong way. This is where we got to be careful out here in the industry is that you got to get good at articulating and showing your value and helping the consumer go, it's worth every penny to go with Matt Benelli because that guy is the best of the best. He's worth it. And we need to be able to have that message shared. If it can't be shared, you're gonna have some issues. I'm not gonna have an issue. We're not gonna have issues. You will.
Well, and this gets into showcasing the solution, how you're going to help this person solve a problem. And I think the challenge with the way a lot of times we try to articulate our value as realtors is we start to list out all the things that we do. Here's everything that I do. Like if your floor guy said, "Hey Garrett, this is what I do. I come in with a sander, I sand, I do all these things, and then I apply all these, and I do this from A to Z." And there was no discussion about what that means for you, you probably would still be sitting there going, I think we could do this ourselves. Right?
This
it's like, great. He just told me
this is the special sanding paper that I use. And it's like, oh, good to know. Like, okay, sure.
Yeah. Hey, that sounds, this is the photographer that I use. This is the stager. This is how we get this property loaded and it distributes to all these things. Now, I understand that part of the reason why we do that is because, well, if they see everything that we do, they'll see the value in having somebody else do it because their time is valuable. And that's true. But if it's not connected to their goal, what solution they're looking for, which is to sell a home in a particular amount of time, to sell a home for a particular net proceed value to themselves, to get to the next city because they have a job to get to. If it's not focused on that, the connection of value may not be there. And so we have to get good at understanding the other person. And then, then you can pitch yourself a little bit, because a lot of folks will say, well, what if I'm brand new and I'm pitching my services? It's like, well, then you're pitching how hard you're going to work. You're going to pitch the expertise that you have behind you with your broker or your brokerage or your colleagues. You're going to pitch like, you're going to get my attention because I really want this to work. And that is how you start to then, quote, sell yourself to gain a contract with somebody and work for a particular price.
It definitely is the biggest challenge at hand is the people that are just getting started. And that's always been that way in the real estate industry. The hardest part for a rookie is actually getting started and getting rolling. Somebody said it to me the other day, which I really liked, is people don't pay for what you're going to do. They pay for what you did or what you've done. That's where people can perceive your value. Just like the flooring guy, me being able to see all the floors he's done and all the people on social media that are like, oh my gosh, it was so great having Anthony in our house. What a gentleman, what a nice guy. You know, seeing all those comments and those remarks and the pictures of all these floors and finishes and why he did things certain ways and his expertise coming out made it a no-brainer. But it was what he has done. It's what his past is that made me say, this is a no-brainer on our side. We know what we're ready to go do. I use Andrea Tool at the group all the time as an example. And recently I went to the mailbox and I had like 6 pieces of mail from her over like a 1-week time period. And I was like, what is your problem? Like, what is going on? I actually called her and said that, and we were joking about it. But the funny thing is they were all just listed and just sold postcards. And she's like, that's just the way it worked. She goes, I had a ton of new properties come on. I had a ton of properties go under contract. And every bit of me was like, she is a master of her craft. Nothing was like, oh, I'm so tired of seeing this mail from Andrea. Every single piece was, because she has got her hands in so much real estate going on out here. And as far as I did when I talked to her, she just seems cool and calm and collected. And like, I've got the right people helping me out in the right places. Nothing about that made me look and say, wow, she's too busy or she's burned out or she's maxed out. I know exactly what her value is. I would hire Andrea in a second and I would not talk about, well, let's break down the commission here, for example. I want to know exactly what it is. Wouldn't do it. She's worth it. I can tell from a mile away she's worth it. We don't have to go there. This is what we need to focus on. But this is why commissions are coming down. If they're tracking that in cities math, this is why it's happening.
Well, and let's be honest, there's going to be different people who offer different services at different prices. In fact, I think, when I see a lot of the conversation that goes on in certain communities out there, and I'm not going to name any names or places for this stuff. A lot of the realtors getting together, this is crazy. We need to like band together without actually saying it. I'm like, that's exactly what they said the problem was.
That was the problem.
Like, that is going right. That's looking Sherman Antitrust in the face and saying, I'm coming for you. It's like, don't do that. Like, the marketplace works well when there's different people providing different services at different prices. If you're worried about getting, quote, beat out by a discount broker, then figure out your value proposition and offer something that beats them out, and understand that there's going to be clients that are going to go to that and they're going to be fine.
That is a healthy marketplace, by the way. Like, let's be really clear. The opportunity for someone to come in and say, I will do it for 0.5%. I'm going to do this for 0.5%, and I'm willing to take, the risk on this. And I have a model for my business in mind. I'm going to run with it. To the person that says, I want to come in and I'm going to charge the top of the top, cream of the crop fee, and this is my business model, and here's how I run with it. You shouldn't be mad at the person that's willing to do it for almost nothing. They get to run their business the way that they want to run it. And by the way, and I go back to car dealerships all the time, car dealerships have been doing this for years. The make it up in volume and the selling the high-end luxury and making it up on each individual unit that they sell. It's very different. Both models work. And in the car industry, Jaguar is not getting upset at Honda, at least back when I was selling. Hondas have really changed their approach of how they sell vehicles.
They got John Cena now. Well, they've had John Cena for a while.
But again, it was like they weren't trying to compete. They understood their different places in the industry, and they said, you're serving a certain client, we're serving a certain client, and we're all okay with it. And we have to look at that as business owners in this marketplace. Don't get frustrated by the person that's willing to do it for less. Just realize they're taking a hit, they're making a business decision, and what's your business model? And work with it, run with it.
And this has been happening in real estate too. Maybe, and I've talked to many agents about this, and some agents have never done this, and some agents do this frequently, is they negotiate those commissions when it comes into the deal. Oh, we got to pull this deal together. So let's just kind of give a little bit here and there. Seen it happen a lot. And so the idea that all of a sudden, people are getting robbed of agents are getting robbed of their pay. It's like agents have been negotiating this all the time. It's part of what's been going on. And I know there's a lot of the concern of, well, how are we going to handle this when there's no offer of buyer broker compensation and things like this? And we've talked about this on many episodes, but what I think is great, Garrett, and I want to read some of the statement that the Northwest MLS in Seattle made, because I think that they're kind of spot on with way they're thinking about this whole process. And basically what they said
before you read it, Matt, the Northwest MLS was probably the forefront runner when all this stuff started. Things started to kind of show, and even before it really turned into like a massive lawsuit, like they saw the writing on the wall. They started making changes really early. I actually was kind of, poking fun at them up there because I'm like, okay, calm down. Like you guys are like going hypersensitive on this. But the reality, the more and more I look back on it, like they were the front runners of saying, how can we protect the consumers? How can we make sure the realtors are in a good spot? How do we make sure this is a good working arrangement for everybody? They really went out of their way up front. And so to have them now stand up again, I think says a lot. They're not just coming out of the woodwork. Like they've been all in on this since it started.
Yeah. And for a little history, in January, well, I guess last year, but it took effect in January of this year. Washington State put in place the requirement to have a buyer broker agreement for agents that are representing buyers in a transaction. And they joined, I think it was 14 other states that already have that requirement in place. So they kind of like have that momentum going of people learning that, and then to be ready for whatever changes could come about as it relates to the offering of compensation. But here's what they've said this week. We're saying this in the last week of May, is they highlighted and said the changes is a step, and they're talking about the settlement proposal. The changes is a step in the wrong direction and is detrimental to consumers and brokers alike. NAR's removal of compensation transparency from the MLS pushes consumers and brokers to make secret deals off MLS, inviting deceptive practices, discrimination, and unfair housing. Depriving buyers of information about the transaction risks harming buyers, especially those buyers who are already disadvantaged, including first-time home buyers and members of protected classes. Now, they also said here, and this gets into what they did with their policy, accordingly, the Northwest MLS plans to revise its forms and listings process to ensure sellers are aware of an option that currently exists when listing a property for sale, but may not be apparent to all sellers and brokers. In some instances, a seller may be prepared to pay compensation for a buyer broker, but may not be willing to offer a specific amount of compensation when listing the seller's property for sale. The seller may instead ask that the buyer include any requested amount of compensation payable to the buyer broker in the buyer's offer. The seller can agree to that amount or negotiate just like any other term of the agreement. I mean, Garrett, they're basically saying you could always do this. We're now just going to make it abundantly clear on the things that you can do so that the playing field is leveled out there for everybody.
Yep. And as I said, like, I don't think like this has been a cut and dry thing that everybody's just been like, well, the changes are coming. We're just going to do it this way. It's just going to settle out this way. I think, the Northwest MLS is the first one to stand up and say, hey, okay, like we actually have a plan around this. And also to call out the warning signs of what this could potentially be, I think is a really good thing that I have not heard talked about enough. I have not heard enough people come out and say, these are the things that we're concerned about these changes. I think everybody's been kind of afraid to talk. I think everybody's just like,
I get that too. I understand why, no one wants to say something that is incorrect or whatnot. They don't want to, and these are uncomfortable conversations to have. But conversations nonetheless that we need to have if you want to be prepared to articulate your value, sign buyer agreements, have clarity on your listing agreements so that when you do go public in whichever MLS you're in terms of under whatever rules you're allowed to do, so that the consumers and participating brokers can have clarity on like, well, how should we even approach this property from a negotiation strategy and standpoint?
Well, and I saw an article, I think it was yesterday, I was scrolling through it. It's the first one I've seen in a long time addressing real estate in general and the day-to-day activities of real estate. And the article headline was, and it falls into everything I'm tracking too, is that for the first time in a while, there are more sellers than there are buyers in the marketplace.
Oh, it was Robert Refkin had said that in an interview. Yeah.
So I've been watching it, and I agree. I didn't look at that and be like, "Oh, that's a false headline trying to grab." Nope, I actually 100% back it up from all the stuff I'm studying right now. So I look at that and I say, okay, so that is going to change things as we start moving forward, and sellers are going to be saying, "Okay, well, if there are more of us than there are buyers in the marketplace, how do we attract buyers in? What are the levers that we have that make it appealing for a buyer to come and look at our house?" Well, one of them is what's being offered there to the buyer's side to make it easier for them to be able to buy. What allows them to hold on more of their cash so that they can actually buy my house in an easy way. If I'm the one who's offering commission or offering compensation, the interesting side is I now have a buyer that all the other houses out there, they can't buy, but they can buy mine. Like all of a sudden, like where they're having to use that money to pay for their realtor, now they're like, we can apply it to our down payment. That means we qualify for more house. That means this beautiful house over here on this cul-de-sac, like we qualify for that house. Like all of a sudden it opens up opportunities. And I'm looking at this market change and go, it's very easy to have the what if, oh, it's going to be this way when it's a buyer's marketplace, not as it's changing right now. And I think this conversation is going to drastically change about what is the seller, how are they positioning, how are they putting this on the market, the conversations you're going to have with your clients of like, what does it mean to not offer? What does it mean to actually, put some compensation out there? What does it mean to say, hey, we are willing to talk about it? Like, put it in your offer.
And that's coming. I know agents that are getting ready to put properties on the market that are going to have basically a question mark in the buyer compensation field of what's being offered out.
Yeah. Because I mean, as a seller, if I was putting my home on the market, I would want to make it available for as many buyers that are out there. There are certain marketplaces, I get it, and there's certain price ranges where you're like, you know what? Most of my people aren't getting a loan. They're going to just come and pay cash for a property like this. I get it. You might have a different strategy around that. But when you start getting into, certain types of loans, certain classes, certain, first-time home buyers, people that are scraping together every single dollar they can make to be able to make that deal work, you might have a very different conversation with your seller about how we're going to position this thing on the marketplace. And I would say one of them is probably going to be, are we choosing to compensate or are we choosing to leave that up to the buyer to figure out, which could very much change who could buy your home.
It can definitely change. And this is where, regardless, we're not here to say this is what's going to happen and this is the right way. I mean, I certainly really appreciate the comments coming out of NWMLS and I vibe with what they're saying. They make a lot of sense to me. But how do you manage this for yourself as an agent out there in the field is, one thing is get really good at understanding math and cash flow, because I hear a lot of people say, well, now that this is on the table and can be negotiated, and then I always say, which by the way, always could have been and always has been, and people have done it, by the way. Like, if my client can't buy the house, I don't want it to be because of me. I said, it's not. It's because they can't afford the house.
Exactly.
It's always been a part of it. The commissions have always been a part of the price, right? It's all baked in. And now we're maybe going to unbake it, which this is why we need to understand cash flow and seller net proceeds, because it's not that the sellers are, quote, paying the commission. It's just coming off of their side of the transaction. And that's how the money flows. And we've been doing this for a long time, so we're very accustomed to it. Appraisals are built into all of this stuff. The market price is built into all these things. But if you can understand this, you can then look at this and say, okay, Well, if we're focusing on seller net proceeds here, which is what we should always be focused on, not just the contract price of the house, because the seller is going to have to pay attorneys, their listing agent. Perhaps they also invested in certain things that they're paying out at closing, like staging or repairs or other things. And then there's been, off of their side from the top contract price also might come some concessions to a buyer and a buyer agent commission as well. Well, there's levers that we can pull. We can either reduce the price to make the property more attractive. We can have that offer of compensation to make the property more attractive. We can offer other types of concessions like 2-1 buy downs, which have been popular to make the property more attractive. It's all a bunch of math. And this is where you get to have the conversation. What's going to make it, as you said, Garrett, easy for this property to be bought by a buyer? Now, on the buyer side, same process, getting really good at understanding math and the cash flow so that you can prepare great offers, because perhaps you're going to face a property that isn't offering a buyer broker commission. That doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be paid. The question is just, how is that going to flow through the deal? And which side of the accounting statements is it going to come out from? And how do we help the seller get to their best net, their best time frame? Because there's a lot of terms that go into an agreement. And if we can understand how the money flows and be able to paint that picture for our clients, whether it's a buyer or a seller, I think you're going to be in a better position to navigate all of this. And you'll also be prepared to then go and show and negotiate on any listing without having to worry about hunting, because I've heard this as well, that, well, they may not allow you to post the offering on your own website and all this stuff. So it's like, gosh, like, talk about the confusion of having to go find this. But if you understand cash flow and you have a buyer agreement, you're going to be able to approach any property in a strong position to be able to negotiate. And if your client doesn't win because they can't afford it, they can't afford it. It's not your fault.
And this happens, by the way, in lots of aspects of life. I'm going to go back to my flooring person here for a second. I feel like my flooring guy was making the bid and he goes, well, I don't want them to not be able to have new floors because of my fees. Like, well, at some point, guess what? I can't afford the floors then. Like, that's what it is. I live with the floors that I have. And that's just the way it's going to be. Or I choose maybe to do it a cut rate way and do it myself, or find someone who will do it for a whole lot cheaper. Then there's that place in there that the consumer gets to decide, is it worth it? And in the real estate world, there's a lot of value to having a really good realtor behind you. And there's a lot of good value that comes from that realtor years later when you go to resell the property and you're like, oh, like, I didn't realize all these things that might have been wrong with this property, or things that maybe we didn't know to ask, or, well, that came back and bit us and we didn't realize about that. Like, there's all kinds of value that comes around this. And I think, as we move forward here, part of our job, part of your job as a real estate agent, is to provide all the information so consumers can make educated decisions about what they're going to do. We don't tell them what to do, but we give them enough information so that they can decide and they can move forward. And one of the practices I recently saw was when you're sitting down with a listing and you're going through a potential listing and you're going through, how are we going to look? How are we going to present this thing? What are all the factors that we have to work with? Bring some information from a lender to show somebody and say, look, if we offer compensation, if we're going to play that, it allows that buyer to take this amount of money and use it to their down payment, which opens up somebody who necessarily would not have been able to qualify without that money. If we take that money out of it, now that buyer qualifies for a home that is this price. Show them what the difference is, not to talk them into offering, but to show them, and so that they can say, hey, you know what? We want to offer that, or hey, maybe we don't. We're okay with it. It's a decision they're making. Just the same way as that we make decisions about if they're overpricing the property and we're like, I know they're overpricing it. I'm taking a risk here with this one. Yeah. These are all risk factors that you get to decide and go, is it worth it? Is it worth it for me to take the risk? Is it worth it for me maybe not to take this property? We get to use all these levers in here. And for the most part, you give people enough information, they will make smart decisions every single time. Lack of information, you get wonky decisions. Like, why are they doing that? Because they don't know the risk. They don't know the rewards, usually.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
It's like a
regardless of
teenage
what
driver.
changes are,
It's like a teenage driver ripping down the freeway that decides to pass everybody in the emergency lane. And everybody who's an experienced driver goes, oh my gosh, that is so dangerous. And the teacher's like, woo, like only live once, like we're going for it. They don't understand the risks yet. They haven't seen the dangers of what can happen and why things can happen certain ways. And then all of a sudden we become educated and we become smart as we grow up and we go, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Like that is so incredibly dangerous and stupid. And the lives you're putting at risk and all these. We learn things, and this is your job as a realtor. Educate them, give them information, all your wisdom of what you do so they can make smart decisions.
yeah. Well, bringing it back to the beginning, Garrett, where you talked about, the articulation of value being this reason why commissions are coming down because consumers are just asking and agents are basically folding like a cheap lawn chair. Well, the first element of value that you can deliver is that education. If you're educating your people, that is showing your value right there. And they're going, gosh, Garrett is such an expert in this. Like, we really would love to have him guide us. Another thing that you can do, which I think is very helpful as a little exercise, is go back to your most recent transactions and ask yourself, what were the things that you did to help guide your clients? And what were the things that were most valuable to them throughout that deal? And what was the ultimate value for them? That's going to give you some feedback on like, oh, this is where my value was. I helped these clients save time. I helped these clients get a higher net. I help these clients negotiate a tough deal. I help them work through all of these challenges that they didn't have to worry about because I was able to be the person that took care of it for them. That's where you're going to be able to learn your value. And then you can take that, package it up in your, pre-listing and your buyer packets and all these things and share it with your potential new clients and show your value so that they understand.
And you don't need to do this by yourself, too. Like, I know there's some out there that are sitting here and their brains rack and they're like, what is like, what is my value? What do I really offer? What do I do? As I've said, one thing you can do, and it's kind of funny and people might laugh at me for this, but go on a chat GPT and say, I'm thinking about hiring a buyer's agent. Why would I want to do that? What are the top 10 reasons I should hire a buyer's agent? Print that list off and sit down and say, well, how do I help accomplish all these things for my clients? And you're going to have a great list of stuff. I've had lots of people do this. It works really well. Second is you've got a lot of great realtors in your office all around you. Go to lunch, have a lunch specifically to sit back and say, guys, let's talk about our last 10 transactions, each one of us, and all the aspects of value that was brought to the table, how we protected our clients, how we helped them so they were successful from point A to point B, how we helped them negotiate crazy negotiations that maybe we had to handle that nobody would have ever thought would have ever happened. Start documenting this stuff and getting it all together and use the pool of information and energy from your people around you that are professionals. There's so much information in your peers and learn from them. Go learn together.
And there's information in your clients too. Connecting to an episode we did just a little while back about brand. Kayla Foster had posted in our Facebook group saying that she did a little exercise where she went on her Instagram and asked her followers to just describe her professional business basically in 3 words and got these incredible answers. And I look at these things and I'm looking at some of them right now, and these words become the value: caring, attentive, brilliant, thorough, straightforward, understanding, accessible, committed, confident, competent, connected, warm, empathetic, informed, dedicated, honest, like funny. That was one of them too.
She did have to pay them for these, but no, I'm kidding.
But one person was like, I can't even pick 3. There's so many things, right? And so your value is also really best described by other people. And so leverage that too, which I think is great. And then, like I said before too, Garrett, is get to understand the cash flow. Like pull out an old, if you've done a cash deal, pull out a HUD-1, pull out a closing statement, pull out some of the things and just kind of look at how all the money was flowing and really understand that. And like, who brought the cash? How did the lender come into this? What was the down payment? And just really understand how the cash flows, because that'll give you so much more insight into understanding where your commission plays in this as well, so that you can better explain that as part. And it's not hard, guys. Like if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not a math person, you need to be this kind of math person. And it's not difficult if you just sit and look at it, because it's not like algorithms and, logarithmic scales. It's pluses and minuses. So you can do it.
So Matt, I'm really happy you brought that up, because my brain was going like, oh, that just sounds like, oh, I might as well watch paint dry to get in there and do that. However, if I was taking this serious and I was like, I need to go figure this out, I would take you out to lunch and I would be like, Matt, can you sit down with me and show me how to really interpret all these numbers, what they all mean, take a pad of paper with you and take lots of notes, because there are people around you that are good at looking at numbers and deciphering what's going on. And usually us that say we're not good at it, we've just never been taught. We've never learned. We've never taken the time to learn. As Matt said, this is pluses and minuses. But so often we get this mindset that like, oh, I'm not good at that kind of stuff, or I don't look at that stuff and understand it very easily. And if that's the story that you want to own, that's on you, because there are great people around you. You can take out, go ask questions, go learn from. Just like I have all my lenders and my people that I reach out to and gather information. I don't need to know the nuts and bolts, but I need to know good information to be able to share so that I show up as a professional. And that's all we're talking about here. So
great opportunity for managers, brokers, and potentially maybe even a 11 circle seminar.
Oh my goodness. There we go. So with that being said, as we are continuing to grow here, and as you're learning more about what Matt and I are offering through Life at 10 Tenths and the 11 Circle, and different aspects are going to be coming out of the future of Life at 10 Tenths. We're just so excited to be sharing with you as we continue to grow this and have more offerings for all of you. We just appreciate you being part of this community, part of our world, part of the podcast. All of you that are continuing to listen as we continue to make our change and to grow here, I just want to say thank you to all of you for being on this journey with us. And Matt, loving this, man. Let's continue to keep going and continue having fun.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good, everybody. Go to Life at 10 Tenths. Check it out. Thanks, everybody.